Welcome to the Economy Magazine. I'm Benjamin Chong Alfares with the top economic stories from around the globe. Coming up today, Russian inclusion of Crimea inspires Western sanctions. While austerity offers Cyprus hope, Cypriots continue to suffer. And a discussion on Alibaba's upcoming IPO. First, the headlines. The European Association of Automobile Manufacturers said the EU car industry enjoyed a strong recovery in February. New car registrations, which closely track actual sales, rose 8% in February from the same month a year earlier to over 860,000 vehicles. Car sales in February rose for the sixth consecutive month after 6 years of falling demand. But car sales are still lower than before the financial crisis and in France continue to fall. Russia's economy is showing signs of a crisis, the government in Moscow said as the US and the European Union announced sanctions. Russia's economy faces the weakest growth since a 2009 recession as consumer demand and investment remain flaccid. The Ukrainian crisis further strains the economy and weighs on the ruble, which has dropped 9.4% against the dollar since the beginning of 2014. As capital outflow from Russia may reach $70 billion in the first quarter, some fear this could push Russia into recession. Moody's Investors Service cut its rating on Argentina as the government struggles with major capital outflows and a lack of access to international debt markets. The credit ratings agency downgraded the rating to CAA1 from B3 and revised its outlook to stable from negative. Argentina has been cut off from international capital markets since its 2002 sovereign bond default, while potential investment has been chased away by high inflation. The country's reserves have plunged to $27.5 billion from a high of $52.7 billion in 2011. Thailand announced the end of a nearly 2-month-old state of emergency in Bangkok and surrounding areas, hoping to lure back foreign visitors. The use of emergency rule dealt a heavy blow to Thailand's key tourism industry and scared of foreign investment. Tourist arrivals were down 4.1% in January and February compared to the same period last year. But the threat of further violence remains real, as protesters said the lifting of the state of emergency is irrelevant.
Many have urged to lift the state of emergency so as to rebuild confidence in the economy as well as in tourism. The cabinet has agreed to impose the Internal Security Act instead.
And lastly, Britain's economy grew at the fastest rate last year since before the financial crisis, but output slowed slightly in the final quarter of 2013. British gross domestic product expanded by 1.9% in 2013, the biggest expansion since 2007. Finance Minister George Osborne said in a statement, "It is more evident that our long-term economic plan is working." But Osborne stressed the need to stick to the austerity drive introduced by Prime Minister David Cameron's coalition government in 2010. Osborne will deliver his annual budget on Wednesday. As the West cautiously implements initial sanctions to pressure Russia for its aim to annex Crimea, the outlook for Russia's economy becomes increasingly grim. Joanne Citruk and Daniel Roth have more in the following report.
The news from Crimea has been coming at light speed since Sunday, when more than 95% of the referendum votes leaned towards splitting with Ukraine and joining Russia. The next day, the Crimean parliament voted unanimously in favor of the measure. The ruble became the official currency, and Moscow sent €295 million worth of aid. It's a series of events that have triggered some minor sanctions from the European Union and the United States. Brussels froze the assets of 13 Russian officials and 8 Ukrainian.
After yesterday's vote, which is totally illegal and unconstitutional, we took 3 sets of decisions. The first decision is a series of sanctions against the leaders of Crimea and the Russian leadership. And the sanctions consist of both freezing their assets and preventing them from traveling abroad.
The Americans have put 11 people on their sanctions list, among them the Deputy Prime Minister of Russia and 2 advisors from the Kremlin.
I'm authorizing sanctions on Russian officials, entities operating in the arms sector in Russia, and individuals who provide material support to senior officials of the Russian government.
The response to the Crimean vote has been modest, But there seems to be a will to intensify these measures if deemed necessary as relations continue to cool between the West and Russia.
We have started today discussing the longer term, the need to reduce European dependence on Russian energy over many years to come. It's some of these sorts of things that will be the biggest costs in the long term if we make no diplomatic progress over the coming weeks.
Whatever happens could be disastrous for the Russian economy. The ruble has already lost 12% of its value against the euro since early January, and foreign investors may start to take flight in search of more stable places for their capital. Some analysts are suggesting that this exit could reach $70 billion in just the first quarter of 2014, leading Russia into recession.
A year after a financial earthquake shattered years of prosperity in Cyprus, an austerity plan offers some hope. But for the time being, employment prospects remain discouragingly dim. More in the following report.
Akis was a 45-year-old banker when he made a strategic decision to go into early retirement last year as Cyprus plunged into an economic crisis. But having only received 10% of his promised retirement funds, he has to find a job soon to make ends meet.
I'm starting looking for a new job, starting from the beginning. But the market, more or less, is dead.
1 year ago, Cyprus became the fifth Eurozone country to ask for an economic bailout. The country's second biggest bank, Laiki, collapsed and was taken over by the Bank of Cyprus. The government imposed a so-called haircut of at least 47.5% on savings of more than 100,000 euros. Thousands of Cypriots took to the streets in protest. The economy nosedived into recession, shrinking 5.5%. But analysts say it could have been worse.
It's going to be about minus 5.5 as opposed to minus 9, which was the forecast about that. So that's a good thing. That's a nice surprise for most people. On the other hand, 2014 will be a little bit more difficult growth-wise.
That's little consolation for the businesses forced to close and the thousands of families now in need. The Cyprus Red Cross distributed a record number of meals and clothing over the winter. Almost 6% of the population now depends on food banks.
Since last Christmas, when we had the first signs of the crisis, number of Cypriots started increasing, and we have a lot of Cypriots. Now it's half and half, 50% Cypriots, 50% migrants.
Thousands of people have lost their jobs, spelling misery for young graduates. Talia has been looking for work since graduating in 2013. She expected to at least have found an internship.
Most of the internships were unpaid. A lot of them were unpaid. And the ones that were paying, the competition was very high, very, very high. Because there aren't enough paid internships to cover all the graduates.
With unemployment at almost 16.5%, there is little relief in sight, and Cypriots will have to tighten their belts for some time to come.
And we're now joined by Asian business expert Tal Reshef and I-24 News journalist Daniel Roth for a discussion on Alibaba's upcoming IPO. Guys, thanks for joining us. How is it that such a gigantic company is so unknown to so many people around the world?
Things are getting known to people once they need it. And as long as you do not do business with China and you do not purchase things that are manufactured in China, so far you didn't need to know Alibaba. It might change with the time.
Why do we need Alibaba?
First of all, if you're going to a market such as China and you need to purchase things and you do not know the ways that the things are working and you face possible, unfaithful merchants, you might encounter a situation where you need to be sure about the money that you put and the merchandise that you are going to receive. It might even be difficult to locate the producer, the that you need.
Obviously, there's a language barrier. Obviously, there's also the fact that a lot of people don't really know China, don't have an idea of where to go looking even.
And we need to remember the size of China. The language that you mentioned, yes, it is a big barrier. The size is a big barrier. The Chinese way of doing business, which is different from the Western one. So all those reasons come together to make to create the need for somebody like Alibaba.
Right.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I think it's, you can think of it kind of like a digital port town in a way. It's a place for cultures to meet and do business, and as Tal said, a way for money to change hands in a space that people trust, generally speaking.
Right. Clearly, it greatly facilitates a business for people outside of China. Now, the one thing that actually really fascinates me is the person who set up Alibaba, Jack Ma, an English teacher. It's unbelievable. I mean, in your opinion, as you know China, is this kind of success, can it be replicated by someone else, or is this like a one-time thing, a one-time wonder?
It has already been replicated, not in this area, but in other areas. Look, the Chinese market is expanding, it's booming in many directions. It is not the first brand that you encounter that comes from China. We know about Haier, about Hisense, we know about the other, about Huawei. Behind each and every name like these ones, there is somebody like Jack Ma. Now, Jack Ma is more attractive, is interesting.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's not necessarily a Jack Ma, because a lot of these other people do have some sort of, they come from something.
Yeah.
Not to say Jack Ma doesn't come from anything, but he's an English teacher. He's really a self-made person. They're not all self-made.
Well, we have to remember that coming back to China of 1980, nobody was Jack Ma.
Right.
Nobody was earning even a Western salary.
It sounds like the Chinese dream in a way, just like the American dream once upon a time. This is like the Chinese dream.
Every Chinese person who earns today a salary of some $1,000 a month, not more than that, I'm not talking about a billionaire like Jack Ma.
No, of course.
It was nobody 30 years ago.
Right.
So Jack Ma is a part of 1 billion people survey, if you like.
He does have some characteristic that you don't often see, though, in leadership circles. This is a guy who took himself out of the CEO chair. He's the chairman of the company, obviously, still sort of the overarching governor of things.
Right.
But you don't often see someone just take themselves out of the chair, especially in the lead up, in the years leading up. He announced before he stepped out, in the next 5 years, you're going to see major changes to Alibaba. And then he said, and I'm going to be over here, and we're going to have, and he brought someone else in.
Yet at the same time, I think we shouldn't forget that this is still a Chinese company and things are done differently. I mean, one of the reasons why they didn't go to Hong Kong had to do with the fact that, with the board specifically, for that matter, there's not a lot known about people necessarily that are behind this company. What is going to happen now that they are going for an IPO in the States? Considering that Yahoo has a 24% stake, where do we see this going? How is this going to affect the world economy, for that matter, the market?
Yeah, there are some questions to be asked. First of all, of course, why is he going to the States? He has this reason that there have been some limitations put on him from the Hong Kong stock market, but still he had other options in East Asia, such as Shanghai, where it is his home base, if you like. He could go to Singapore also, but he chose to go to the United States, so he's got a reason why he's going there. And behind it, there's even, another question that precedes it. Why does he need the IPO? I mean, he's managing a giant of more than $100 billion.
Right.
Why does he need those $16 billion that he's going to retrieve out of this IPO? It's very clear that he's looking west. He's not satisfied by being the emperor of the online purchasing in China. He wants to do it in other places. I'm
going to have to cut you in here. Sorry, I'm not sure about why.
I'm not sure that the United States market is his target. Following the other steps that he's taking before, I see that he's very interested in Russia.
Right.
He has translated all his site into Russian. He looks into Turkey. He might be looking into Latin America.
I want to refocus for a second. What about Yahoo? What place does Yahoo have in all of this? Considering that Yahoo is really being pumped up tremendously by this deal, what's in it for Yahoo?
Well, Yahoo has entered into Alibaba some years ago with a purchase of 40% of the stock of the shareholding. They've diluted it later on to 25%. This is what they have today.
Right.
So they are weaker now than they used to be before. I'm sure that they are going to have a great, income out of it. As I understood, something like 80% of their activities now concentrated in East Asia, mainly in China.
Mm-hmm.
So Yahoo.
Some measures say that 88% of their business is Alibaba related.
Right.
It's just an enormous amount.
Which is saying a lot for Yahoo as well in terms of what once was and what isn't anymore. I guess Alibaba is more or less sort of taking over here. Eclipsing.
Yeah, but I think what we are seeing here is a phenomena which is very curious. First of all, because of the reasons why such a company emerged. It's not only the ingenuity of Jack Ma, who is a very intelligent guy, really brilliant guy. It's also that China today, apart of the fact that it's a huge market, the second big...
Sorry, I'm going to have to end you here.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Tal Reshef, and thank you very much, Daniel Roth, for joining us today. I'm Benjamin Chong-Alfares. Please send us your comments via our website and Twitter, and join us again tomorrow for more.